The woods had been silent all evening. Not the kind of peaceful quiet you get before dusk, but an eerie, suffocating stillness that settled in our bones the moment we set up camp. No birds, no rustling of leaves, just the sound of our own voices and the crackling fire. It felt wrong. We had stumbled upon the abandoned property by accident, following a barely visible trail that led to a rotting old farmhouse surrounded by skeletal trees. The place looked like it had been deserted for decades. Windows shattered, the roof half caved in, and vines swallowing the structure whole. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. Then we saw the well. It sat just beyond the farmhouse, surrounded by crumbling stone, covered in dead ivy like the hands of something trying to claw its way out. The wooden cover had long since rotted away, leaving nothing but a black pit stretching deep into the earth. "Bet it's got no bottom," someone said. The others laughed, grabbing a rock. "Let's see how deep it goes," another chimed in, winding back their arm. That's when we heard it. A voice. Soft. Fragile. Female. "Help me out." The words slithered up from the darkness like a whisper on the wind, curling around us, freezing our laughter in our throats. The voice was wrong, too clear, too deliberate, like it had been waiting for us. We stood there, staring into the well, the firelight casting flickering shadows across its jagged mouth. Someone swallowed hard. "Did you hear that?" We all had. The silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then another voice, a shaky whisper. We should go, but no one moved. Instead, one of us stepped closer, peering into the abyss. "Hello?" For a moment, there was nothing. Just the sound of our own breathing, the distant crackle of fire. Then the voice came again. "Please, help me out." This time it was clearer. Closer. Like whatever was in that well wasn't as far down as we thought. No one spoke. No one breathed. The fire behind us crackled like brittle bones snapping in the quiet. The voice had changed. It wasn't just fragile now. It was closer, too close. One of us, the one who had stepped toward the well, hesitated. "We should—" Then the sound came. Scratch. A long, dragging scrape echoed from the depths. It wasn't like nails on stone. It was wetter, fleshier, like something raw was being dragged against the inside of the well. We took a step back. Then another. "Maybe it's an echo," someone whispered, but no one believed that. The one closest to the well swallowed hard. Maybe she's actually down there." Another voice, shaking now. "That place has been abandoned for decades. No one could still be alive down there." But the voice came again, warping, stretching. "Help me out." This time it wasn't pleading. It was commanding. A shiver clawed up my spine. The one nearest the well bent down, grabbed a large rock, and held it over the opening. "I just want to see how deep it goes." Their voice was tight, uncertain. I opened my mouth to say no, to stop them. But before I could, they dropped it. The rock tumbled, clattering against the jagged sides of the well, sending echoes ricocheting into the night. We all listened, holding our breath, waiting for it to hit the bottom. But it didn't. It just kept falling. And then a sickening thud. Not stone against dirt. Not rock hitting water. Something else. Something soft. Something that moved. A sharp gasp erupted from the well, something between a breath and a scream, like air being forced through broken lungs. We all jumped back. Then the voice changed. It was no longer pleading, no longer weak. It was smiling when it spoke. "Now I know you're there." And then from the darkness, something crawled. The air turned solid, heavy with something unseen but felt. A presence, a weight pressing against our chests. The night around us didn't feel like night anymore. It felt like a mouth open, waiting. The well groaned. Something moved. First, a soft, wet slither. Then the sound of fingers, nails scraping against stone. Not clumsy. Not frantic. Deliberate. We ran. No one spoke. No one had to. Our instincts screamed "go" before our minds even caught up. We turned as one, sprinting toward the trees, our flashlights bouncing wildly, the beams slicing through the suffocating dark. The fire, the well, the thing inside it, all of it behind us now. But the sound followed. A wet thud. Something heavy hauling itself up, pulling free from the well's grip. Then came the laughter. Low at first, just a whisper in the wind. But it grew, high, sharp, bubbling with something unnatural. Not joy. Not relief. Something else. Something that had been waiting. Someone screamed. It might have been me. Branches slapped against my face as I ran, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. And then the flashlight beam caught something. A shape ahead of us. Standing between the trees. Too tall. Too thin. Arms too long, hanging like something unfinished. And its face. No, because it was her. The woman from the well. But she wasn't wet. She wasn't dirty. She was dry. Mummified. Her skin stretched tight like paper over a brittle skeleton, lips curled into something that was almost a smile, but too wide, too wrong. And her eyes were still sinking, like she was still falling, still in the well. And then she moved, not stepped. Glitched! One moment she was in front of us. The next she was closer. The air shattered with a scream, and the lights went out. The woman in the well part 4, the darkness swallowed us whole. Not the kind of darkness where your eyes adjust. This was thick, like ink filling the air, clinging to our skin. It was suffocating, pressing against us, forcing its way down our throats. Someone was screaming. Maybe all of us were. Then came the whisper. Why are you running? It was everywhere. Around us. Inside us. Not just a voice anymore, a presence. I fumbled blindly, my hands scraping against bark, trying to move, trying to find anyone, but the woods had turned into a maze of twisting, suffocating shadows. Then a flash. My flashlight flickered back to life for just a second. And she was right there. Too close. Her head tilted, her jaw slightly unhinged like she was trying to remember how to smile. Her skin was dry, cracked, like something that had been dead for centuries. But her eyes were still sinking. Still falling. Like they were being dragged down by something we couldn't see. I stumbled back, tripping over a root. The flashlight hit the ground, rolling in the dirt, its beam spinning wildly. And then, the others. Their faces flickered into the light. They were standing still. Too still. Eyes open. Faces slack. Their chests barely moving, as if something had paused them, like dolls left abandoned in the woods. No, I whispered. And then snap. Not a branch. A neck. One of them, one of my friends, collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. The woman took a step forward, and then they all moved. Not toward her. Toward me, their heads jerked unnaturally, their mouths hanging open, but there was no breath. No sound. I turned and ran, but the woods weren't the same anymore. The trees had moved. The path we had come down, gone. And behind me, I heard them laughing. All of them, even the one whose neck had just snapped. The voice whispered again, curling against my ear, breathing into my skull. Why are you running? I was never supposed to leave. I ran blindly, crashing through the trees, the laughter twisting around me like a rope tightening. It wasn't just coming from behind anymore. It was everywhere. The woods had no end, no beginning. Every turn led to more blackness, more shadows shifting in the dark. The laughter became choking, gurgling, wet, like it was bubbling up from ruined throats. And then the whisper changed. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside me. You dropped something, I stumbled, my foot catching on a root. I hit the ground hard, my palms scraping against the dirt, the breath knocked from my lungs. My flashlight flickered, rolling a few inches ahead of me. Its beam cut across the forest floor. And then I saw it. The rock. The same one we had dropped into the well. It was sitting there, just inches from my hand. But it wasn't clean anymore. It was covered in something. Something black, thick, pulsing like it was still alive. The ground beneath it was wet. I reached out, my fingers trembling. I don't know why. Some part of me, the part that still thought logic existed in this nightmare, needed to know. Needed to feel it. But before I could touch it, a hand shot out from the earth. I screamed. Fingers, rotted, broken, burst from the ground, grabbing my wrist, pulling me down. Nails like rusted knives sank into my skin, dragging me toward the dirt, toward the wet blackness pooling beneath the rock. The well wasn't just in the ground anymore. It was here, everywhere. I thrashed, kicking, trying to pull away, but the grip was unnatural, strong, its bones grinding as it clenched tighter. Then from above me, the whisper came again, but now it had a face. She was standing over me, smiling. Her body was dry, her skin stretched tight over bones, but her mouth dripped. A black, inky liquid oozed from her lips, sliding down her chin, dripping onto my skin. And her eyes, they were gone. Only empty sockets stared back at me, filled with endless, sinking darkness. Then she knelt down, her fingers brushing my cheek. And in a voice that no longer even tried to sound human, she whispered, "You looked in. Now you have to see." The ground beneath me split open, and I fell. I plunged into the darkness. But I didn't fall. I sank. The air turned thick, sticky, like something was pressing in from all sides, forcing me down. My screams didn't echo, they were swallowed the second they left my throat. The world around me was a black abyss, pulsing, shifting, alive. And then I landed. Not on solid ground. Something else. Something soft. Something that moved. I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The space around me was suffocating, the air humid, wet, thick with the stench of rot. And then I heard them, the whispers. Not one, not two, hundreds. I turned and the darkness shifted. Bodies. Dozens, maybe hundreds, tangled together, writhing, trapped beneath a surface like skin stretched too thin. Their mouths were moving, their lips forming the same phrase over and over. Let us out, let us out, let us out. I stumbled back, my foot sinking into the flesh-like floor, and I felt it move beneath me. A tremor rippled through the space, and suddenly the whispers stopped. Silence. Then she was there. Standing inches away, her hollow eyes locked onto me. Her head tilted slowly, too far to one side, the sound of wet snapping echoing through the space. Her mouth opened, wider than a human mouth should, wider than anything should. And from deep inside her throat I heard them, the screams. Not hers. Everyone else's. Every voice that had ever fallen into the well. Every soul that had been pulled down, swallowed, devoured. I turned to run. There was nowhere to go. The walls, if there even were walls, began to close in, pulsing, growing tighter, squeezing the space, crushing everything inside. The bodies beneath the surface screamed, their hands stretching up, reaching, grabbing, and then I felt it. My feet weren't on the ground anymore. I was sinking again. No dot, no comma, no note. I thrashed, clawing at the air, but it wasn't air anymore. It was her. Her arms stretched into the darkness, her fingers like roots, pulling me down, wrapping around my legs, my waist, my throat, dragging me deeper. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was her face, twisting, stretching, turning into mine. And then I was looking up at the well, at the opening far, far above, and someone was standing there. A group of them, young, laughing, holding a rock. And before I could scream, before I could tell them not to look in, before I could warn them, they dropped it. And from my own lips, my own voice whispered, "Help me out."